Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. And if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do for a living.
So my name is Bryan Wish. I live in San Francisco, California. And then for a living, I run a company called Arcbound. We work with a lot of experts in given spaces and really build their thought leadership platforms in a very end-to-end service infrastructure.
Awesome. So how did you get the idea for this company?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing up, Dan, I started to really question, I think, the bigger questions of life of how do you make money? How do you have a purpose? How do you do all those things and like have a stable family and kind of put all those pieces together and like build a very meaningful and intentional life? I think those were questions as a teenager that I had, not as a 40-year-old. And that's drove a lot of what I've done to, date. I became really passionate about the written word and storytelling and community building online. In college, I was working on a web platform called Wish Dish, and it was a collective of like 800 people sharing their online stories and overcoming challenges and expressing themselves in a very meaningful way. So that was such a great kind of window into the world I'm in today. Not a clear monetizable model, but a great first step of what kind of pulled at me. From there, I wanted to get that feeling kind of at a soul level, like being on the right track. I very much felt that, and I wanted to get back to that and find like a way to make money doing it, and went on a kind of rendezvous of experiences and ended up working on a book launch for an author in Washington, D.C. Who was selling his marketing tech company. His name was Alan Gannett. And, I just was thrown into the fire. I was managing 5 or 6 different vendors, to run his book launch and build his brand, a web, guy doing a website, a long form writer doing his talks and, newsletters, and then helping him with social, and then doing all of his community and PR. And then, I was managing an ads person. And then, okay, on top of that, I got a firsthand look into publishing and PR and speaking, and saw how all these industries really needed to be like really unbundled and then kind of rebundled all back together. And so my first crack at that was, how do I build a service ecosystem that really supports individuals end to end on this journey, where someone can come to us and write their book, do their podcast, get their website built, where they can have all their platform work done, and we're ahead of the trends, and we're building out the brands and the messages. So all of that like needed to be put together. And so over the last 5.5 years, I've been super heads down building that. And, I think really catching our stride right now and really thinking a bit bigger of, what's the next step for this industry? Not only how do I scale the service infrastructure, but how do I democratize it as well? So it's been quite a journey.
Awesome. So I'm curious more about the platform. Like, who would you say is like an ideal customer for you?
Yeah. So today, right now, we're serving a lot of coaches and consultants who are post-economic. Usually they've sold a business or they've established a really significant coaching practice or consulting practice. They're CEOs who are like well into their career, and they're not trying to figure out how their business is going to survive in 2 months. Those are types of CEO clients. And then investors are interesting clientele as well, because they are trying to bring on LPs or limited partners to invest in their fund or find deal flow, right? And so having a brand and like understanding how to kind of stand above the noise and do it in a way that's authentic to them is really interesting.
For sure. So like, without mentioning one of your clients, can you just talk about like, okay, if somebody signs up to work with you, like what exactly does that process look like, and how they exactly get value from working with your company?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll share whatever you want. So, I mean,
Sure.
right now, like a white glove client who comes on board, like we have a whole arc launch process where you're helping them define their ownable message, their audiences, kind of what their audiences want to hear, the message that they're going forth with. We are doing usually their website in that process, because they're individual brands / businesses. We're doing a lot around monetization, helping them understand how to leverage their network and relationships they've built throughout their career, and kind of sell that against their products and services. So there's a lot of foundational upfront strategy work that goes into this process. And like the individual is the product, and like they're creating a set of products around their expertise. And so you really need to think critically around how all these pieces fit together because it's such a holistic experience. And all right, how do you design for that audience? How do you put a site together for that audience? How do you start creating content for that audience? Whether that's a book, social posts, newsletters, right? All of it needs to fit together.
For sure. So what would you say is like the biggest challenge that you face right now in the business?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I'm going to say it's a challenge. Like it's a very heavy service infrastructure. And so we scale with humans and we scale with clients. And I think it's not so much, it's more of like an existential question I have for myself. It's like, do I want to keep banging my head against the wall for another 10 years to scale this thing to hundreds or thousands of clients? And I think the answer is yes, but the answer is yes. And like, I want to democratize this space. And I want to figure out a more scalable path to enable individuals, maybe like yourself, who would probably invest 1,000, maybe 500, $250 a month in this work with a clear roadmap of how to go do this, but don't have six, seven, eight, nine, $10,000 a month to go do this. And so I have this kind of internal struggle of like, I don't just want to serve the elite who can afford this. And I absolutely love working with these people. They're fascinating. I learned so much and I'm so grateful for what we've built. And I feel like to distill what we're doing in a way that's simple and usable across an experience for an individual who also like values to like build their arc and trajectory in life. Like to me, that's what's really compelling of enabling. And again, it's going to take a long time to do that and scale that. But I think if you can bring both those parts together, you can create something that's very defensible and scalable and like I think just scaled impact, right? And I think that's kind of what I see.
For sure. So like essentially you're looking now to create kind of like a lower ticket offer and like a done with you offer as opposed to now you have this like done for you service. And to your point, it's expensive to maintain, so not everybody can actually afford it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like on the done for you, like the white glove model we have today, like we are thinking about monetization, we are thinking about ROI, like they're active conversations, right? And we're doing things to enable that beyond the brand work and connecting it to the business and connecting it to like the trajectory of like where someone wants to go. At the same time, though, how do you enable that information to be spread to people who maybe have the time, who are maybe a bit younger and have the ambition to like take this on themselves and make it accessible and more frictionless to be able to do? Because right now it's a massive cognitive load. And even if you're younger and you're like writing a book and you're like still a one man or woman consultant, like it's still very hard to do. So how do you make all this work more accessible in a way that's really easy? And so like that's where like where I'm thinking about. But then at the end of the day, there's still a lot of pieces that need to be built on the white glove service side. But the question is how do you bring it all together? And I think that's a really interesting question.
For sure. So I guess like as of now, what has been your best strategies to actually scale this business? Like have you run Facebook ads,
Yeah, I don't
cold
really.
outreach, things like that?
Yeah, I think it's doing what we do for our clients. I mean, first off, like I am writing content and working with someone on my team to like produce the newsletters and the posts and like create compelling things that we're doing for our clients, like against my own arc and what I care about and sharing those stories. I am doing a lot of outreach to different targeted audiences based on like knowing that they'll probably have an interest and start having a lot of conversations. A lot of people are referring us business, clients who are referring us people, and then people come inbound or hear about us and it kind of goes from there. But it takes a while to kind of build the credibility to get someone else who's been quite successful in their career to be like, okay, I'm going to hand off my identity to somebody else and let them cradle it for a while and know it's going to impact me financially, emotionally, mentally, right? Because this work is so ingrained at a human level, and that needs to be held with a significant amount of responsibility.
For sure. So obviously now in 2024, AI is a big part of lots of organizations. So do you guys currently use AI? And if not, where could AI maybe come in and add value?
Yeah, our beliefs on AI is, I mean, again, it's a phenomenal tool. It's a great technology. I think it's only going to like increase. I think one, we have found AI to be the most effective when clients come to us with a body of work and a source material. So let's say a client like Nira Y'all has written 2 best-selling books. He does a lot of great long-form content. Well, you can create a training bot on his material and then begin to use that to cut it up across the platforms. And so, you might save 30, 40% of the time on what it would take to do from scratch because you have things packaged together. Now, if you don't have a big body of work or sort of kind of crest content like that or pillar content, it's a little bit harder. because you're having to create from scratch around a message. And so like AI can only take you so far. And it's more short term. AI is also great on like our podcast division. So, cutting up clips and kind of breaking kind of episode summaries down and like just really making a nice transition there. I see AI though as like part of our future in a significant way, from building websites, doing visual identities to helping come up with messages. Like there is so much that we could do with the right data to really democratize, I think, our work.
But do you feel like, AI is widely accepted by many of your clients, or I think that, there's definitely lots of people that might like push back on it. So I'm just curious, kind of like
Yeah,
that scenario.
it's not used to like create new stuff for us right now. It's
Got
used to
it.
make our internal processes a little bit more efficient. I think in the future though, like it'll be used to create source material from scratch for sure, under the right conditions and constraints. But for right now, I think it's more of a internal efficiencies across all of our different processes.
Makes sense. So what would you say is like the one biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew before you started this business?
I mean, a lot of things. I mean, I never quite understood maybe the quote until maybe the last year of like why investors normally invest in second time founders, just as a principle, because you truly do learn so many things as a first time founder that, he just just happen. I think one, I had a co-founder in this business and we're still good friends, and his last month is this is last month. But I think one of the things that, I did was I put probably way too much like trust in someone to manage who had never run a business before, to build an internal operation. And it eventually got to a point where like the business just simply, I think, outgrew his ability to understand how to like maintain and operationalize at a financial level. Right. And we had such a trusting relationship, as like any business partner does, where, the saying was, hey, you look in and Bryan, I look out. And like that worked really well to a point. I think as like leading a company, the ownership though is on you to like really have the systems and the people in place to make sure like you're thinking about things in the right way. And I think that both of us, right, just as early founders, we didn't know what we didn't know. And that's, I'm not pointing a finger at him and saying, hey, like, but it's more on like me and like also just, but how would I know? Right. And so
Right.
I think the big lesson from that is like that I've really kind of come into is when you start a business, and for everything I do in the future, and the new models we'll build within Arcbound, it's like really starting actually with the financial conversations first around profitability and like how to use that to scale a business, and not just building a business off revenue. And we scaled up pretty quickly, but we didn't give ourselves enough cushion. And we was more of like speed and scale versus like the thoughtful build of what this was going to take. And I think that we've done a lot of things thoughtfully because we were trying to put so many pieces together, and like it's a new industry and we just kind of threw everything in the stew, and we're like, we're going to like make sense of it once everything's in the stew. So I don't have like regrets. I just think like, I think it's like catch 22, because if I was so thoughtful at the beginning, would we be where we are now?
Right.
And would we have gone slower and taken some of the risks that we did? And like, okay, would we be as far along? I don't know. Right. So I think like it's a good lesson for me for the future, because there's been some painful like learnings in that. So I think that's one like big one. I think two, as I looked out more, I wasn't in front of the talent maybe the way I should have been. And I trusted like the onboarding process and how it was. And I just was focused on the sales and the vision and the strategy for the business. And I think I could have been much more engaged in the hiring process. We've really revamped our pretty much team in the last 6 months. And I'm like really stoked about who's here right now and like where this business is going. But, I like looking back, like, will we have made certain hires that we did? Probably not.
Right.
Not because like they weren't good people, but because like there's a certain breed of a human that I want at Arcbound and the culture that I want to build. And I think taking more ownership of that culture from the start, every executive coach or whatever online is like, oh, culture, culture, culture. And you're like, I'm so tired of culture. Like you get it, like once you screw it up. And so I think for myself, it's just been a very humbling journey, right? Of, oh, this stuff is important, and who you have on your team is the most important. And like, oh, how do you create a great work environment for them matters. And I think I just thought all that stuff would sort itself out. And like, I'm just going to keep building the business and like people are going to figure it out. And I think that's a little blind. And, but again, like we've done a lot of things right. You've asked me lessons, like there's are two glowing lessons that like I can take ownership of and be like, oh, like knowing what I know now, like these are things I'd be very present to. What else? I mean, there's more. I would say like those are two like big recent ones I've really had to reflect on.
100%. So if we're going to have this conversation again in 1 year from now, where do you see things going for Arcbound?
Yeah, I would say we are, I mean, ideally, I'm out of sales. Ideally, I have a COO, CFO in place, and someone running sales. Ideally, reposition the brand in a way that just is refreshed and looks a lot better. And we've begun the journey to democratize this space and industry.
We're rooting for you. So if somebody watching this wanted to reach out, do you mind sharing your website or social media? I guess best ways to get in contact.
Yeah, it's arcbound.com, arcbound.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, and we'll constantly be evolving.
So Bryan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, bye.